Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business here on your favorite weekly African business stop. In Nairobi, Bonnie Tunya brings us latest from East Africa. Esther Awin in Lagos gives us news from West Africa, and with me in Johannesburg is Christine Mundwa. My name is Victor Homoeswana, and this is the Africa Business News. Bonnie, East Africa is one regional economic bloc that has demonstrated the most potential to get regional integration in Africa to succeed. But President Pierre Nkurunziza, my goodness, in Burundi, which is a member of the East African community, by the way, five-nation state, it's not one of those in my book. His bid for third term is posing a real threat to cohesion within the regional bloc. What happened since many of his own people had to flee the country, denouncing him at some time?
Well, Victor, the Burundi situation has been a tough one, hasn't it? Parliamentary and local elections are currently being held in Burundi despite an opposition boycott and weeks of protest over the President Pierre Nkurunziza's plan to seek a third term in office. Now, we have reports that gunfire has been heard nightly in the capital, Bujumbura, and scores of people have been killed in unrest since a failed coup attempt last month. Now, the presidential election was due in June, but was put back to 15th of July after pressure from the regional leaders and other AU members. Now, the African Union is not sending observers to the general elections, saying that the conditions for a free and fair vote have not been met in Burundi. And the AU and the UN had called for the elections to be postponed, but the government rejected the demand, saying that conditions were stable enough for a vote. While a delay could create a dangerous political vacuum, Victor, several polling stations had been attacked in the capital and in the provinces in Bujumbura, according to police officials quoted by the AFP news agency on Monday, that many of in Bujumbura say the unrest has been prevented has prevented many people from registering to vote, adding that they feel that the outcome of the process is already known and will not be fair. Now, on Sunday, the Speaker of Parliament, a guy with a very difficult name, Pientahoya Nanyuma, said that he had left the country because he feared he would be killed. So far, tensions in Burundi have forced more than 100,000 people to flee this year alone, with just about 3.8 million Burundians set to vote in this particular election.
Bonnie, I had your conversation about banking in East Africa on Friday's closing bell. There's a liquidity squeeze in Tanzania, increasing the demand for deposits. I think the only positive story I saw recently came out of Rwanda, where profits in the banking sector improved in the first quarter of the year. Still, my guess is that banking in Uganda also requires some serious consolidation urgently. Just too many banks out there, more so if as many as 16 of them are at the risk of a default.
That's right, horrifying indeed, and yes, at least 16 banks will be undercapitalized if their top 3 creditors are defaulted, according to Bank of Uganda's stress test for 2014. Now, Victor, the Bank of Uganda says that those banks would need a capital injection of just about 362.3 billion Ugandan shillings to stay in the market. Now, the Bank of Uganda's stress test, which established the bank's ability to absorb shocks, also indicated that at least 6 banks would fall below the industry's capital requirement if their largest borrower defaulted. Now, Victor, this is not particularly new, because if you follow the recent announcements out of East Africa, Kenya also set up new capital requirement for the banking sector that is expected to see a lot of cannibalization in this industry. But going back to Uganda, is that this particular move added that at least 5 banks would be unable to meet the statutory capital levels of the shocks that were to materialize. Now, the report also goes further to say, Victor, that however, the banking industry remained sound and profitable. And this is a sort of sentiment we hear even out of Nairobi, that although there were issues with corporate governance, things are not so bad.
Speaking of regional integration in East Africa and beyond, Kenya leading the way there with a trade pact with a major economy in the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, and that's Zambia. What is the essence of this deal, and which sectors of the economy do you expect will benefit in both countries?
There's a lot of conversation right now, like you rightly put, a lot of efforts to improve trade between African countries. But you see, Kenya and Zambia have just concluded that particular agreement, the Joint Permanent Commissions Corporations, commonly known as the JPCC, which will see the two countries increase the volumes of trade between them. Now, these two countries are planning to open what they're calling to open their trade barriers, and they will see specific goods from Zambia access Kenyan markets and vice versa, Victor. And obviously, a lot of people say this is coming too late in the day. But speaking after the two-day session of the 9th meeting, Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohamed noted that despite the long relationships between Kenya and Zambia, the trade remained very low, which is worrying. Another moment, the trade between Kenya and Zambia stands at just about $70 million worth of exports into Zambia and about 50 million of exports into Kenya, which is very modest if you ask me. But other areas of cooperation will include security, energy sector, tourism, sports, and a host of other issues. Now, on security, to be precise, the two countries have agreed to enhance their joint efforts of safeguarding security, common values, and other fundamental interests of the continent, including the fight against piracy.
Okay, thank you, Boni Tunya, coming to us from Nairobi in Kenya. Our next stretch sees Christine Mundwa join us to talk about some of the big stories out of Southern Africa. We're still on Africa Business News, and in our Johannesburg studio, I'm now joined by Christine Mundwa, Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, showing some interest in Malawi, or at least attending a forum of the Southern African country. However, there's no way we can commence this conversation without the Marikana report, to an extent that the document might have caught a lot of people by surprise. You'll recall the long-awaited Farlam Commission into the massacre at a mine operated by a lawman in August 2012, in which 44 people died. The impact of this, what impact will this continue to have on the appeal of mining in South Africa? I ask Christine Mundwa. Obviously, mining has already taken a lot of beating, people seeing it as not so profitable anymore. But then the Marikana Commission comes out and it says nobody is to blame for the death of people. That should cause a lot of anxiety.
Certainly it does. I mean, we were in the community on the night that the president read out the findings of the report. A lot of disgruntled people really couldn't believe the fact that especially the mine went unscathed pretty much. In fact, the only recommendation was that Lonmin was found to not have necessarily complied with the housing, and that the recommendation was that, you know, the Department of Mineral Resources must look to see that they actually implement the housing agreements that were put in place there. But, you know, the only real casualty being, I suppose, South Africa's National Police Commissioner.
But what about mining as an industry in South Africa? Do you think it will take a knock? Will investors start looking at it as something that's going to explode? Because unresolved issues like this tend to fester and eventually come back.
Certainly, look, I mean, we've been listening around to commentary around the whole thing. Of course, you know, there is the commodity price issue. There is also the fact that, you know, it's becoming expensive to almost do anything in South Africa on the labor front, on the electricity side of things as well. We're hearing people from the smelting industry saying that they're considering moving their operations abroad because operating in South Africa is becoming that much expensive. So you can imagine something like this doesn't help the cause. It's
called triple bottom line reporting. You've got to account for more than just what you do with the money. But talk to me about the African bank story. It's showing some signs of recovery. It was at the ropes not so long ago. People had written it off. It's making a comeback.
Somewhat. If you look at it on the front of the losses that are narrowing to date, if you compare it with the same period last year. But, you know, if you listen to the curator, he's still telling you that, you know, we're far away from reaching profits, in the sense that, you know, if you look at these results that were released now, the bank continues to be plagued by, you know, low disbursements of loans, as well as receiving low repayments as well. He also talks about the fact that they are on good track, and also, when we look at the listing, there was much anticipation of when will the bank relist. People were expecting it to be this year. He says we're a few good years away from that, because this bank would as the bank would need to build a reputation for investors coming in.
Well, let's move next door to Zimbabwe. Mining always there seemingly generates all kinds of headlines. One mining company, Rio Tinto, packing and leaving because they're saying we can't deal with these indigenization laws. But on the other hand, Zimplat's ramping up its investment. What's going on there?
Certainly. So the biggest miner there has announced that it's going to be building a refinery. It's to the tune of about in excess of $130 million.
Platinum?
That's it, platinum. Already some 30 million has been put down. Now, of course, you will know that Zimbabwe has been bringing its platinum to be refined here in South Africa. So that will by next year, the mine expects that it will be commissioned. That is, of course, that refinery plant, and already we'll see activity in there.
Let's see how that one pans out. Christine Mundo, thank you very much for joining me. Next up, Esther Aoyin in Lagos. Chats to us about West Africa. Esther, President Muhammadu Buhari is cracking the whip already, starting with a very cooperation he was the chief architect of long ago. I'm talking about the NNPC, or the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation. Did he have to dissolve the whole board, though?
Well, Victor, this development has been welcomed by the general public, and the general consensus here is that the NNPC is a very corrupt institution. And so if the president is going to clean it up, drastic measures have to be taken. Now, the oil company has been named in several scandals over the years, particularly the $20 billion allegedly missing, as claimed by the former central bank governor Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. And interestingly, the board of the NNPC has only met once in the last 2 years. That's according to the head of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Now, members of the board have been redundant for years. According to the group, the board is supposed to meet quarterly, but this hasn't been the case. It's also interesting to note that there have been speculations that President Buhari may just decide to oversee the petroleum ministry himself. But of course, that's left to be seen.
Let us close with a quick look at aviation in Ghana, though. Who is Fly 540, the airline that was offloaded by FastJet recently? And when is it expected to be back in the Ghanaian skies?
Now, Victor, when it comes to domestic air travel in Ghana, travelers aren't exactly spoiled for choice, as there are only just 2 operational domestic carriers. However, it appears that that's about to change with the addition of Royal Fly 540, formerly known as just Fly 540, following its acquisition by new investors. Now, in May last year, it suspended its operations as part of a restructuring exercise by its former parent company, FastJet, to focus its efforts on East and Southern Africa. However, the board of directors remain the same. Now, the airline hasn't given a specific date when it will resume operations, but it says passengers won't have to wait for too long.
That was Esther Aoyin out of Lagos, Nigeria. Before we go, let's take a look at what happened on this day in African history. Central African country celebrates its Independence Day today. I'm talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo. This country literally and figuratively affects the entire continent and should be the hub of African trade and investment. The sleeping or reluctant giant of mining and agriculture in Africa, the land of Papa Wemba and Kofi Olomide, sharing a border with no less than 9 other African countries in the east, west, north and southern regions. The DRC, or Zaire, is what calls in the past as well, gained independence from Belgium on this day in 1960. First Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, a man clearly ahead of his time in his vision of a united Africa, was deposed, put under house arrest and later assassinated. Since then, the country, rich in diamonds, gold, coltan, copper and many other minerals, has lurched from one crisis to the other, leaving us all wondering when it will take its rightful place as the true heart of Africa. To the people of La République Démocratique du Congo, remember the words of your founding father, Patrice Lumumba, when he said, "The future of Congo is beautiful," and have a happy Independence Day. We're back with more Africa Business News next week. Our thanks to Esther Aoyin in Lagos, Bonnie Tunya in Nairobi, and earlier on, Christine Mundo in Johannesburg. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa. Until next week, au revoir.